Sri Lanka awaits with bated breath that letter from President Donald Trump, which will tell us what kind of tariff we will have to pay to send our goods to the United States. Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Eliathambi, and to discuss the tariffs which are coming up, I have with me Mr. Dhananath Fernando, no stranger to our programs, and he is, of course, the CEO of Advocata. Good evening, Dhananath.
Good evening, Niresh.
So, Dhananath, where's the letter right now? Is it with you?
It's not with me. Probably it must be on the either on the email or on the mailbox.
Okay. Well, last week they said it will be sent on Friday. It wasn't sent on Friday. Now today is Monday, and the news reports from Washington say that it will be sent today, or some letters to some countries will be sent. I don't know if Sri Lanka is important enough to be in the first batch of letters, but they will no doubt send it during the course of the week. Now, this letter about the tariffs, Dhananath, first of all, normally it's called a communication between governments, but President Trump called it a letter, as though he was going to write a letter and sort of put it in the post. But that's not the way it happens. It will probably come through their embassy. And where will it be delivered? Is it the finance ministry? Is it to our negotiating team or the foreign ministry?
To be honest, Niresh, I'm also not sure. Most likely it will be to our negotiating team, which was led by the Ministry of Finance and also with some representations from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So there must be a contact point that they'll be sending it. I mean, as you said, generally it's a communique or a statement that you do, or like you announce as a statement, these are the countries and these are the tariff rates which is applicable for these countries. But I think probably President Trump is taking it in a different way, and we had to wait and see actually till once we receive the letter or communique or message, we only get to know what is in it and in which form actually we get the notice.
Now, Dhananath, we really don't know at this point what to expect. We were told back in March that Sri Lankan exports into the US would be tariffed at 44%. Then our government negotiating teams, I think, visited, 3 times, perhaps more often, but as far as I know, 3 times to Washington. They held discussions. Of course, every country on earth was sending teams to Washington, and we actually don't rank very high when it comes to the quantum of exports. Therefore, I'm not sure how our delegation was actually welcomed, whether it was a top-level US negotiating team or just some low-level people. I'm not quite sure how that worked out. But nevertheless, what we as Sri Lankans hope is that our team was able to impress on the Trump administration that it should be much less than 44%. But that 44% also has wavered a little bit, isn't it? We're not quite sure whether it will be 44. Is that their base point, or will it be more or less? Because now today, President Trump said that countries which are in BRICS, BRICS, which is somewhat in competition with the Western world, that those countries would get an additional 10%. Now, we are not in BRICS yet, but I think we intend to be. So I hope that if BRICS gets tariffed by another 10%, that it doesn't sort of hit us as well. But I wouldn't think so. What do you think?
Yeah, so my reading of the situation, Niresh, is while we are all expecting the letter from President Trump mentioning that, okay, your goods will be applicable with this tariff rate, it seems whatever the rate, it could be 10%, 20% or 44%, I feel this number will going to change over a period of time, as what we see at the moment, because it seems that President Trump is going to use it as a tool constantly. Okay, he first he first announced this shocking rate for us for 44%, and now based on the global developments, he's pulling that out again and say, okay, there'll be additional 10% on BRICS, and again there'll be some global event takes place, and he will say, okay, if he's anti-American, there'll be another 5% on top of it, the applicable. So it seems it's going to be, while we all expect, okay, now we have done the negotiation, it's done and dusted for some time. I feel if this is the approach, we do not know what President Trump would do. It's quite unpredictable, but it seems that he's going to use it back and forth as a tool. I think that's why 44%, again there was 10% flat rate with a 90-day window, and now again it will be applicable from 1st of August, and there's now new notices saying 10% any country with an anti-American policy. So it seems for me, while we expect, it seems to be quite volatile, and we have to adjust to that new normal to work with President Trump's administration, and my expectation it's going to be even if we have a lower rate, there is a chance that it can go high, and again if we have a higher rate, there is a chance that we can negotiate it down, depending on what transactional sort of diplomacy that we do with the President Trump's administration as at now.
Now, these tariffs are supposed to come into effect on the 9th, on the 1st of August, rather.
Correct.
The deadline for the negotiation was supposed to be the 9th of this month, which is just 2 days away. But of course, like you said, countries would continue to try to negotiate. I think the Indian Commerce Minister has said that India is not bothered by these deadlines, and that India will continue to negotiate with any country in the world, so that India will get the best tariffs from every country. So that seems like an interesting position. Of course, we in Sri Lanka are quite anxious because of the fact that our apparel exports, a huge portion of that is bound for the US.
Absolutely. So our apparel, rubber, and some food concentrates, US is the main market, and unfortunately there is no other market that can replace because of the purchasing power that the US market predominantly has. And as you very correctly said, it is not only now from moving here onwards. I feel now once these tariff announcements are being done, the other countries will also start reacting. So then there will be another phase that we also have to negotiate with those numbers, because since we have a unique situation that US is one of our main trading partners, we need a lower tariff rate, and we need a lower tariff rate to the entire world, because if the consumption drops, even if we get a lower tariff rate with US buying power going down, it will have an impact on our exports, number one. Second, even if we get a lower tariff rate, imagine if it's a further lower tariff rate is being received by Bangladesh or India or another country who is competing on the same basket of exports, then we will again in a disadvantageous position, because then our orders will start shifting to the other countries based on the competitive environment. So we basically need better purchasing power at US on one side. At the same time, we want a better tariff rate, at least an equivalent tariff rate with our main competitors. If it's lower than that, actually there can be an advantageous position, but if it's higher than that, then we would be in a disadvantageous position. But at the same time, based on each tariff rate, other countries will also start reacting to it. As you very correctly said, India is trying, they have entered a trade agreement with the UK. They are at the final stages of entering another trade agreement with the European Union. They are trying to enter another trade agreement with Switzerland. So that means these countries are reacting, and when they react and when they get to deals, we cannot say, okay, it's not us, it's India. But in a global world now, We are competing for the same market share, so it is going to definitely impact us. I think as a solution for Sri Lanka, I think it's important that we focus on having a very strong trade negotiating team and probably a research unit at the Ministry of Trade and Commerce to really understand these global dynamics, because it's changing so dramatically. And with what we see on the BRICS notice, because we have also at one point intended to join BRICS, and they had few statements on the war in Iran and on recent actions by the US, and from which direction are we going to move, also within consultation with Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's significantly important during this time, because otherwise all of a sudden unexpectedly we will be landing on the wrong side with greater repercussions on our economy. And if it's a different time, maybe we may have some absorption capacity, but as at now, since we are just coming out from this debt crisis and we are on a triple C credit rating, we really do not have any room for policy missteps, nor to take a wrong decision in a dynamic changing global world order.
Now, when it comes to negotiating with Donald Trump, there's very little use appealing to his sense of charity. He doesn't get that, does he? I mean, from his past record, he will respect strength, not weakness. So if we go and say, it's a hard luck story, our economy was destroyed, government went bankrupt, and we're just getting back on our feet, that's not going to impress him much, is it?
No, absolutely. I think your observation on that he respects the strength is quite right, and probably he will look at what is in it for the US. So what are we going to, in terms of bringing the tariffs down, what else are we going to buy from US, and what is in it for US would be his main concern. So absolutely, and at that point we have to open, probably the government will announce, if we get a lower tariff rate, what we have negotiated with, are we going to buy LNG from them, or whether are we going to lease any aircrafts to our airline from US, which is quite unlikely because we already have a Airbus fleet. So depending on what negotiation terms that we have come with the US, probably we will need to see. But as you very correctly said, our the
hard luck
story will not work. We have to be, by respecting his, in a way, to his to the American strategy and his administration, is probably the way to negotiate, and more on a transactional basis probably would be the way forward. But it is, in a long run, Niresh, it is not going to help the entire global world order, and there will be further repercussions, and we should also be quite, that's why I said we had to be quite cautious on the new developments on this geopolitical space, because the reaction may move on either direction, and at the same time, with his new bill, this big beautiful bill, there will be some implications at the same time, because for an example, he is imposing a 1% taxes on outward remittances from US. So for an example, there are a lot of Indians lives in US who sends a reasonable amount of remittances. So what would India do when they lost that 1% revenue? It may not be a big amount, but what are the other tools that they try to negotiate, or what other measures that they may take to bridge that gap will have an impact on Sri Lanka on the other side. It may have an impact on Sri Lanka. So we have to have quite a wide sources of information to analyze this, and act promptly is the need of the hour.
Now, speaking of our competitors, Dhananath, Vietnam seems to have got it right, and Vietnam is a competitor as far as apparels go, because about a week ago, Trump announced that he has struck a deal with Vietnam. Vietnam is being given a rate of 20%, which is far lower than what was earlier announced for Vietnam. So 20%, so they've managed to negotiate it down. And one reason I think is that Vietnam will allow American goods to flow into Vietnam at a 0% tariff. So clearly the Vietnamese understood what's good for them, in all probability, and they acted. And there's also some talk that certain investments from the Trump companies are also going to be channeled into Vietnam. So maybe they offered him a golf course or some prime property. After all, he's a property tycoon. Perhaps something like that. But what could we have offered him? I mean, could we have offered him a golf course somewhere?
Not sure about it, but probably the only options that was available for us was probably on buying some fuel from them, which is which is quite a stretch on one side. Maybe some LNG purchase was the other thing. So I'm not sure what was the final agreement with the government. But that's why on one side that's the worry, because if Vietnam is one of the main trading partners, if it was 20% for them, there is a chance that we will can get 10%, and that would be quite advantageous for us. But on the other side, if it's more than 20%, if it's more than 20% for us, then it would be quite a challenging time. Or even if it's 20%, that would be quite challenging for us to go in on par with Vietnam. So we have to unfortunately wait and see, but my sense is this is going to be again a continuous negotiation by all the countries, not only us. Even the Vietnam bill, when they knew, if they got to know, okay, Sri Lanka was given like 10% or 15%, Vietnamese will probably try to negotiate and try to adjust. And I think we also need to do the same by adjusting, trying to negotiate constantly to get a better tariff rate, which is quite concerning to the global world order. But I think we have left with very limited options rather than negotiating at this point of time.
Now, even the 20% which Donald Trump announced for Vietnam, that doesn't mean that that's what's in the letter to Vietnam. It could suddenly be something else, knowing the unpredictability of the US administration right now.
No, absolutely. Because now if you look at Vietnam is also having an intention to join BRICS. So for an instance, they may have, if they impose the additional 10% on the countries that who support BRICS or who intended to be on BRICS, so then probably the Vietnam rate may go for 30%, or actually it may be still 20%, but there may be some additional 10% on some other country. So we really do not know, and that is the challenge also on investments, because when this uncertainty is quite difficult for businesses, because businesses can absorb bad news, but uncertainty is very difficult to absorb. So we have to unfortunately move to that like working environment with the Trump administration, it seems.
Now, a little bit of an explainer to our viewers who may not know what BRICS is. I'm sure most of them do. It's a grouping of countries which the annual meeting was, I think, over the weekend. It's on now.
Brazil.
Yes, and it's in Brazil. So it's BRICS. Originally, it was Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and then they added South Africa, and then I think last year they added about 5 or 6 more countries.
Indonesia, United Arab Emirates,
Egypt,
yes,
and a few other countries. And many more countries have applied to join, and Sri Lanka's last regime said we also want to join, but I don't know whether we actually formally, I mean, how do you do this? Does one send in an application, or the foreign ministry must be actually writing to the organization? So I don't know whether we actually did that, and whether any tariff would apply to us. Or we don't even know whether the 10% tariff on those BRICS countries would actually materialize at this point? It's very unpredictable, isn't it?
It's absolutely unpredictable. I'm not sure about Sri Lanka's BRICS story, because if you recall, there was a story by the Russian ambassador that even we applied, that there was invitation came from the Russian president, but we had fairly like a we haven't really responded to that, and we haven't sent someone senior. I think he had commented in one of the public forums. So we really do not know what to, what is, to what extent that our intentions are valid at this point of time, but it is definitely unpredictable, because now with this 10% additional tariff on BRICS, if it moves forward, definitely the BRICS countries will also respond back. But at the same time, it would also be interesting to see what countries like Singapore would do, because they said, okay, we have a trade deficit with US, but we are not going to retaliate, because that's not how you treat your friend. And they are considering a different group of countries, and they want to explore more trade options. So it would be quite an interesting time, and that's what I said. We have to be open-minded and see which direction the wave is moving, and then act promptly on that. And again, we have to understand the scale and the context that we are in. We are not Singapore. Our balance sheet is quite weak. At the same time, we are very sensitive to the changes in India. So what's the deal that India is going to negotiate will also, in my view, have an impact on what the Sri Lanka would get, or on a continuous basis, how it would affect Sri Lanka in moving forward.
Well, a tariff on BRICS countries would definitely include India, because they are one of the founder members. But this tariff on BRICS story only came out today. He said it, I think, last night in Washington, which is this morning for us. So this is a new factor in everything. I think he was a little annoyed with the statement which came out from the BRICS summit in Brazil, which condemned the attacks on Iran, and also spoke rather badly of the tariffs coming up themselves. So I think President Trump took this a little personally.
No, absolutely. While it is very difficult to predict President Trump administration, Niresh, I think there are a few things that you can predict. Of course, we cannot predict the exact action, but on an ideologically and a standpoint view, he will more stand on the Americanism position. So as moment that if he feels that something against that broader against America, most likely he will use one of the tools, like it can be tariff, it can be border protection, it can be even on the visa regulation. There was a statement that on your social media, whatever the post that you put on, that has to be on public, because it helps on the visa evaluation. So he will bring any tool out to give you a alert if you are against America. So that's the overall stance that we have to be, we have to look for, but we really do not know which action it could be, and how he will like reverse it, or like postpone, or to what extent that he will go do with it. But definitely if it's something against the broader Americanism, then probably we have to be cautious. Or even if you are slowly teaming up with any of those partners, probably you will have to have the consequences, because his strategy seems to also dilute the broader support, gets on all the power centers who is slowly rallying around US. At the same time, again, it's not a one-side story. You have China and Russia, and to an extent India also on this geopolitical game, and so what they would do, we have to also be cautious. So overall, while it's difficult to predict President Trump's administration, if it's I think the broad outline that we have to believe is this Americanism concept that he brought in, and even if you look at his big beautiful bill, there's a quite a lot of actions, but it more rallies around this overall Americanism concept that he proposed during the election campaign.
Right. I've got a lot more questions on what you just said. But right now, we're going to take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with Dhananath Fernando, who is, of course, the CEO of Advocata. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Sirasa dance. Dancer, come to the nearest venue with your dance group and showcase your talent.
Very warm and special welcome to Your Excellency Thabo Mbeki. Thank you so much for gracing us this evening.
An exclusive conversation with the legendary Thabo Mbeki, former South African president and vice president to the legendary Nelson Mandela. Value the past, build the future, liberation, unity, tough truths, and lessons for Sri Lanka.
How did you balance this dual responsibility?
I would say today, it's really because you base your knowledge and your experience on the experience of the past.
Former President of South Africa Thabo Mbeki in conversation with Siobhan Daniel. On air on Wednesday the 9th of July at 10:30 p.m. on Sirasa TV.
Are you the one?
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am in conversation with Dhananath Fernando, CEO of Advocata, and we are discussing the possible tariffs which we will learn about in all probability this week, which will go into effect in the US or on our exports to the US on the 1st of August. Right, Dhananath, what's the issue with BRICS? Is it the currency issue? Because the BRICS nations had loosely discussed trading amongst themselves in their own currencies rather than using the US dollar. And of course, the source of much of the wealth of the US is the fact that it is the base currency for the world. It's wherever you go, everything is converted into dollars, and the global banking system uses the dollar as sort of the benchmark. So for, I guess, 100 years that's been going on. And if countries ditch the dollar and start trading, bilaterally with their own currencies, then the demand for the dollar would be less. So is that loosely what it is that he is objecting to?
I think it's a few fronts. One is the BRICS countries are looking for a more multipolar geopolitical order than like a Western world-led geopolitical order. Currency and the reserve currency concept is one of the main concerns at the same time. As you very correctly said, US is one of the main reserve currencies, and BRICS wanted to have their separate currency. And if you recall, even President Trump, as soon as he came into power, he had again like an alert saying that if the BRICS is going to float a new currency, that they are concerned about trading with those BRICS partners. So I think he basically want to slow down, because the main advantage that the US has is that reserve currency power, and that's why they can have so much of debt, and they can increase their spending. And that is one of also the main concerns on the other side that the Republican Party members are facing with his key supporters like Elon Musk, who are not much for spending, and they want to strengthen the dollar by cutting down the expenditure, and also on the other side activating the economic growth in US. So that is the concept, but it is yet to be known, because countries also take different positions. For an example, the stance by Saudi Arabia is not yet clear on the BRICS, because there was a point that they are considering, because United Arab Emirates are considering, so whether Saudi Arabia, what they are going to do, because they are also one of the main trade partners, and both times that the President Trump got elected as president, his first visit was to Saudi Arabia. So that indicates something. He didn't go to Canada, he didn't go to Mexico. Both times it was Saudi Arabia, and he came out saying that I made trillions of trillions
in
investments back to US. So it is quite tricky, but definitely it's a reserve currency concept, and trading is one of the main priorities. At the same time, the population that you have in China, India and Indonesia, when you combine those three countries, it covers a lot from the global population, and that power is what they want to take and challenge the Western-led geopolitical order.
Right, but something like coming up with a BRICS currency, you can't do that overnight. It will take a good decade before you can do something like that. I remember when the euro was introduced, it took so long. It was, it's so difficult to do, because each country has their own currency, and then, you have to stop using that currency, and, you have to start trading with other countries in the new currency. And it was a very long, hard climb for the euro to be accepted. So, it's not easy to suddenly start a new currency. So I think President Trump is overreacting there a bit, because certainly I don't see that happening during his administration, which is only 3.5 years to go.
No, absolutely. It will take time, and it will have its own challenges. But I think he wanted to dilute that formation synergies as a mechanism to strengthen the US economy. But also, Niresh, on a geopolitical front, especially when there are two countries who are contesting for the global superpower, things become a little uncertain. I think that's what we see. On one side, President Trump want to retain the power within US. At the other side, like China, and even the next in the lineup is India. They also want to consolidate, and in a different way, sometimes as a friend, sometimes as a trading partner, sometimes they also keeping the options how to get the power. So during those times, with both countries taking extreme measures, the peacefulness or the peaceful environment in the global world order is getting challenged. I think we are going through, unfortunately, that period, it seems.
Right. You mentioned this big, beautiful bill of President Trump, which passed through Congress, and he signed it a couple of days ago. So now it's in effect. Tell us a little about the effect of this bill. And first and foremost, it's an interesting name for a bill which passes through Congress. Normally, they don't have such flamboyant names, but here we go. Everybody's calling it that, the big, beautiful bill. What's the effect that it will have on consumerism in the US, and with that on countries like ours?
It's quite, in a way, concerning, because it also raises the concern whether US is trying to go through the same path that we went through in 2000 22 with the economic crisis, but of course the context is different. They have the power of that reserve currency, as I mentioned, because they are going to give massive tax cuts on one side, and on the other side they are going to increase the debt limit,
which is what the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime did.
Pretty much.
And where did we end up?
Yes. Yeah. So, but as I mentioned, the US has that. Even in Sri Lanka, when we were doing that, the question was, okay, don't think about the debt to GDP ratio, because look at US debt to GDP ratio, look at Japanese debt to GDP ratio, which was right, because of course both the countries had reserve currency power, which we really did not have, and we all saw where we ended up. But as I mentioned, still they have that power, but it is a real concern at that level of debt and that level of expenditure, where what would happen to the US currency on one side, at the same time for their credit rating, because already for the pretty much for the first time in a way in the history that their credit rating has been it's still at a level, but there was one minor downgrade from the credit rating. So that tells something, but of course there's a drastic difference from an A rating to where we are at a C rating. But if this moves forward, we have to be quite cautious what would be the impact on Sri Lanka. At the same time, on as I mentioned, the remittance tax, not a direct impact, but how the other countries would react to it will have a secondary impact on us. At the same time, with increasing the debt limits, and with these expenditure proposals, and with tax cuts, there will be repercussions on our interest rates and the Federal Reserve rates, which will have a impact on our investments and also on the currency to Sri Lanka. So those are the broader repercussions, but it all depends on how the other markets would react to it, and actually how the impactfulness of these policies in the US economy itself will determine what would be the impact for Sri Lanka.
Now, in practical terms, Dhananath, let's say we get a 40%, 44% tariff on our exports to the US. So what that means is our apparel goods would cost more to the US consumer. What's that going to do? Will it mean that the US consumers will buy less of our jackets, our lingerie, and everything else that we produce? And then of course the orders from those US companies would be less, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I think we have to understand there are a few levels of impact if it's 40 or 44%. First is, just because they increase by 44%, from the consumers end, the price may not go up by 44%, because for an example, a garment which is valued at, for the consumer, which is priced at 10%, we are selling it for the buyer probably at $1. So the 50% tariff increase, like say 44% tariff increase, this $1 will become $1.4. So but the compared to the selling price, it is not like going $10 garment to $15. It's
right,
like $11. So actually on the consumer's end, the change may not be actually 50%, but someone has to absorb that 44%. So what would happen is, while there may be definitely an impact, because when this $1 or $2 increase happens on your toothpaste, on your garment, on your electricity, everything, of course the demand from the US market is going to shrink. But it may not be the same percentage that as we expect, because a portion of that will be absorbed by the customer itself, or like that US brand in this case, and some we have to absorb. But the challenge would be, the buyer will try to squeeze the margins from the Sri Lankan manufacturers, and that will have an impact on our employment and their profit margins, and even they may consider shifting orders which is most profitable in this case. So that impact is there. I do not think we can really, surviving in 44% would be quite challenging, and that's why we basically recommend we have to remove rest of the barriers which is internally there to overcome this problem. So removing.
But that's easier said than done. We've been
Absolutely.
talking about this for a long time. We've been talking about reducing the number of holidays. It won't happen. It's never going to happen because it's a. I mean, the voters will won't support that kind of thing, and then our cost of electricity, cost of transportation. I mean. We need massive reforms in those sectors, which it's not going to happen overnight. It'll take years. And of course, all the bureaucracy for FDI, so, an investor comes here, he's got to run the gamut of so many approvals and licenses. I mean, it's going to take a while to streamline this. So meanwhile, we've got August 1st looming, right? Just 3 weeks away. So I get what you're saying. We need to become more competitive, but we've been non-competitive for so many decades that we've got used to this nonsense.
Absolutely, but no, I agree with you that we have been discussing this for decades, and you being a senior journalist, probably reporting this throughout your career. But sometimes I still have a little bit of hope, because unprecedented times are basically pushes us to get hard reforms done. So because apparel industry is huge in Sri Lanka, so as rubber industry, and this is one of our key export markets. So that this may be I'm suggesting to the government, this may be another window of opportunity, because on a normal time, I understand this may not be possible, because the truth is, why sometimes the governments are failing to do it is there is already the vested interest coming in. But in a crisis time like this, it may be a good opportunity to dilute those vested interest powers and get the reform done. So as a suggestion, I would like to float that while it hasn't been done for so many years, maybe you can use it as another window of opportunity to get it done, because now the pressures may be slowly diluting if things are getting difficult. I'm not expecting it to get difficult. I hope we will get a better tariff, but if that's the case, it's important that we move in that direction, because that is the ultimate solution. There is no point doing plaster solutions for this big problem, and let's make it as an opportunity to get the reforms done.
Absolutely. Another point which I'd like to ask you about is, now let's assume Vietnam is given 20% and Sri Lanka is given 44%. Is there any danger of our companies deciding, well, let's move to Vietnam, or our new factories will be in Vietnam? Now, many Sri Lankan apparel companies and other industries as well have already set up in Vietnam, in Bangladesh, in countries like that, South India, and that's because something was favorable. Maybe it's the labor rates or the electricity, the price of power, whatever it was. There was an advantage, but if there, suddenly if there's a huge tariff advantage in moving to Vietnam, do you see that as something of concern as well?
That is a concern. I do not expect our manufacturing to, like overnight or in a shorter period of time, to move there, but it is on a long-term trajectory. They will not further invest here. What we need is not to remain the status quo. We need more investments to come here and operate. But at the same time, it is ultimately also the buyer's decision to which factory that you are going to move those orders, because on certain orders we may have a competitive advantage because of the skill level that we have, and also with other supply chains integration. But it is, while it's a buyer's decision, they will not further invest here for us to go to the next stage, and that is what the concern is. At the same time, there is definitely a probability that orders may shift to the other countries, like we have already seen, because one reason why even the Sri Lankan companies moved to Vietnam, to Bangladesh, of course the competitive advantage was there, and we are slowly losing it with the demographic shift that we are in. and with other investment environment options.
Right. Now, businessmen, entrepreneurs, they hate uncertainty, don't they? I mean, one of the reasons that Singapore is often touted as this wonderful place is because it's very stable for business. So if you go and do business with Singapore or in Singapore, you know what you're going to get even 5 years into the future. Whereas with many other countries like Sri Lanka, we seem to change our policies, our government policies every few months. Hopefully that has settled down a bit. But now with Donald Trump, everything's up in the air, isn't it? You just can't figure out what's going to happen and how our government will react to Trump's tariffs.
No, absolutely. And we have to prepare ourselves to live in a quite an unpredictable trading regime, because now not only the WTO order is diluting, it is even the institutions like the UN, IMF, World Bank. That structure is also somewhat now has been challenged by the President Trump administration, because what he does as at now on imposing different tariff rates for different countries is a complete violation of the World Trade Organization rules, because according to the World Trade Organization rules, you cannot apply different tariff rates for different countries. I mean, you can have a overall blanket import ban, but that also can be for 6 months and you have to extend by every 6 months or 3 months, but you cannot have different because it's discriminative. But what is happening at the moment is completely the opposite. I think that's why China took a stance when at the moment when they had a higher tariff rate for China. What they said was basically, look, you are violating the World Trade Organization's guidelines that has been provided. That was China's constant stance. At the moment, it's quite uncertain. I think it is going to be uncertain in future. As I mentioned, the uncertainty is which tool that the President Trump is going to use. But definitely he will more shift towards what he has promised in the election overall, more towards Americanism, more towards America first, more towards a quite hard stance on immigration policy, more towards border protection, more towards getting diluting the other powers, the global geopolitical order which is rallying around against US would be the overall strategy. But we cannot predict what tools that he is going to use, whether it's a 10% tariff or a 200% tariff, we really do not know. Whether it is something else, but we really cannot predict the tool. But overall, it will be more towards America centered is what we see.
Right, and so far over the last few months, even though Sri Lankan government delegations went to Washington, the statements that came out from the government after that, after each meeting, were, well, they didn't have a lot of details, and they just simply said we had cordial discussions, etc., and we hope to have more discussions and that kind of thing. So there weren't any numbers attached to it saying we hope to bring it down to 30% or whatever. There's nothing at all, which indicates that our delegations really didn't get any inkling from the US delegation that yes, they're going to reduce it, or no, they're not, or whatever.
I would say, Niresh, we have to give some credit to the government because they have been called for 2 other meetings. So that means there has been something going on, because
that's good to hear.
That's good to hear, because if they are not serious about it, probably we will not even get a call back that okay, let's come and let's discuss. So we don't know. I mean, I'm just, because since information is not available, I'm just looking at the events and thinking that there may be some level of conversation at least, but it doesn't mean even if you had like 10 discussions with Trump administration, you are not sure whether you are getting like even a tariff which is more than 44%. But if they have been called for 2 meetings, that means that from the US point of view that they are interested on some level of negotiation, it seems. But we are basically going forward without a lot of information, and that's why it's important the government provides some clarity once the notice is released. But I would like to also give some credit to the government. At least they were the first to respond that we are open for, first in the sense we were one of the, there were 3 clubs of countries. One club said, okay, we are open for negotiations, others basically did not respond, the others basically retaliate. So we basically fell into the first block. We said, no, we want to negotiate, and we send a letter, and that has been done. So actually we got some proactive measures in that sense, which we have to give the due credit to the government. We'll wait and see what is the final outcome, whether how effective that negotiation was, or whether to what extent that we were able to convince the US administration on getting a better deal for Sri Lanka.
Excellent. So that's the situation as of now, and I'm afraid we are out of time, Dhananath. And I think we covered the entire situation as it is. My thanks to Dhananath Fernando, CEO of Advocata, for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.
TV1. TV for life.
18% VAT from the 1st of October on non-resident entities supplying digital services via electronic platforms to Sri Lankan consumers. Sri Lanka to implement property tax from 2027.